Hi guys, I'm Darren, and in this video we'll be checking out the new SR10 Plus receiver from FrSky. Now this is a new receiver which is very interesting because it's part of this new Plus lineup, and what that means is that it will work on both ACCESS and ACCST. You may notice my old friend the Tyrannus X9D there, and that's because this should bind straight up to it. So what we're going to do is have a little chat about this receiver, and then we'll just bind it up on the transmitters and just see how everything goes. Right, so this is the new Archer Plus SR10 receiver. Now, if you're new to FrSky, you may be forgiven for thinking that this means that it's 10 channel. Actually, it just means that it's got 10 PWM outputs. All FrSky receivers can do 16 channel, and a lot of the Archer receivers and tandem receivers, possibly even twin, can do 24 channels. So the number is just the number of outputs. So let's have a quick look. All right, so in the bag we get a cable here that we can hook up to the port. I should get the receiver out first. So on the back here we have a port this plugs into, and that will give us access to stuff like S port. Usually this will be S port and also the A in to telemetry, which is an old school telemetry using an analog voltage. Smart port, obviously we can use wired to update the receiver if we want, and also we can connect it to other devices or sensors. So that's the little plug, and this here is the receiver. So as I mentioned, the SR10 has got basically 10 PWM outputs. So we have 1 to 8 along here, and then we have 9 and 10 in the bottom. Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that this receiver replaces this receiver right here. Now, this is the original SR10 Pro receiver. But if I'm perfectly honest, I don't see this as a replacement for this. I actually see it as a replacement for the stabilized version of this receiver. You can see the casing is exactly the same size. We have the same number of pins, we have the same antennas. The button is in a different place, but we also have the same smart port, positive, analog into and negative port on the back. So as far as casing and everything goes, these two are identical. And of course there was the SR8 Pro as well. So you notice that this receiver doesn't actually have Pro written on it, but it does have the filtering, so you can use it with internal combustion engines with electronic ignitions. Actually, it has improved filtering over these two units here. So if you're using it with IC, this receiver is absolutely fine. But if you're expecting a replacement for this, you may be a bit disappointed, which is why I said it's more similar to this one. So if we compare these two to begin with, ignoring the fact that this hasn't got a stabilizer and this has, because as I mentioned, you can get stabilized receivers, you can see with the standard pins we have 8 outputs on the main block, if you like, and on this one we have 9 and 10 as PWM outputs at the bottom, whereas on this one we have SBUS in and SBUS out, which is down here. Now you may think that this isn't redundancy compatible in that case, but actually you can reassign the pins. We'll have a look at that in EFOS a bit later on, just to make sure where everything is. So effectively, if we had channel 9 and channel 10 as SBUS in and out, it would be exactly the same configuration as this receiver right here, which is why I see this as more a replacement for the SR8 Pro than the SR10 Pro. And the reason for that is quite simple. The SR10 Pro just has more to it. There is more on this receiver than on the SR10 Plus. Again, we have the port at the back with the same smart port, positive, analog in to and negative. So on the back it's identical, but we also have this block here on the SR10 Pro, and this is the SBUS in and out for the redundant receivers. On this one, if we want to use redundant receivers, we have to give up 2 of these PWM outputs, which again would make it an 8 PWM output, same as this. The other thing that you notice is missing is the 2 XT30 connectors, which gives you basically it's not really redundancy, but it gives you a lot more flexibility and backup as far as power is concerned. So it's, yeah, I think it's a shame that they ditched this packaging and went for the R8 package. I would have much rather have seen this in this size case with the SBUS in and out on the back and the two XT30 connectors. And to be honest, I would have paid a bit more to have those features. So maybe we'll get an SR10 Pro Plus or something like that, which does have the power redundancy, but I don't know. I just think it's a shame that we're losing out on some great features from this receiver. So there we go. That's sort of the positives and the negatives. Don't expect it to be a replacement for this. It's more a replacement for the stabilized version of this. We're getting on to now the big positive of this Plus series, which is it's all backwards compatible. So I've not even tried this yet. Right, so I've not even used this radio in quite a while. All I'm going to do is plug in this Beck. So it's the signal at the top, positive in the middle, ground at the bottom. So let's just plug that in channel 1. And just got this switched onto a battery, so switch it on and there we go. Right, so where I don't use this transmitter, I can just overwrite the model. So let's go to our bind. Just as a heads up, this transmitter is running ACCST version 2. That is the only sort of prerequisite. It needs to be on ACCST version 2. It won't work with version 1. And we're going to choose the internal XJT, and it's not D8 or LR12, it's on D16, which is ACCST. So what I'm going to do is hit the bind button, and I'm going to choose channels 1 to 8 with telemetry. If you've not used this before, the channel 1 to 8 is about the outputs. So it's saying these pins will be channels 1 to 8. Whereas if I chose channels 9 to 16, these pins would be 9 to 16. Telemetry on and off is fairly self-explanatory. So let's choose telemetry on. And what I'm going to do is hold this button down and give it power. And we should be bound. So let me do that. Switch that off and on. And we have a green light. So, has this worked? Right, let's get a servo. I'm just going to plug it into channel 2, which is going to be the elevator. And there you go, you can see it's working straight away. I've not done anything on the receiver at all. It's just working with ACCST version 2, which is awesome. I'm not even sure what version of OpenTX I've got on here, or RF firmware, to be honest. It could be out of date, so there we go. That is working absolutely perfectly. Okay, so I'm just going to use the model that I created in an earlier tutorial, but let's go into the RF. You notice this time I'm on access. If you use Flex, make sure to choose the right region, even if you're not using 900. So I'm using 868 because I'm in the LBT zone, but you do need to make sure that it's the right frequency, even if you're binding 2.4. So the internal module is on and the 900 is off. So let's register. So I'm going to press the button, hold this button down and power on. And we have SR10 Plus. Let's come up, click register, registration OK, power off. And let's go bind, power on, and choose SR10. So you can see I've not even done anything on the receiver. It's all just working. So let's put the servo back in, and there we go. It's on our elevator again. So that is working perfectly. I just bound it and it works. You don't need to do any settings for ACCST or ACCESS, which is awesome. So good work. So while we're here, let's have a look at the set menu. Now this is where we should be able to change stuff for the redundancy. So you can see here, as I mentioned earlier on, you can have up to 24 channels. This is where we'll change this. We're currently on SBUS 16, but we can set it to SBUS 24. Now, even though this only has 10 outputs, you can set one of these outputs to be an SBUS out and then connect an SBUS to PWM converter to get access to more channels if you want. So let's have a look at what we've got. So we have channel 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's picking up what outputs we have on the outputs on the radio. And you notice how it's got pins down the side. These are the output pins here. Now, if we did want to use this for redundancy, what we would do is maybe change channel 10, and we should be able to find an SBUS in here, which I can't seem to find actually. We have SBUS out, but no SBUS in. Okay, so I've just gone through the documentation, and if you want redundancy, you have to set SBUS in on channel 1. That sort of messes things up with, I'm a bit OCD, so I like to have AETR set up on 1, 2, 3, 4. But yeah, if you're using redundancy, you have to set SBUS in on pin 1. I mean, effectively, it is just pins, so you can just shift things down, but I'd much rather put it on pin 10 or pin 9, something well out the way that I might not even be using. Whether that's something that could be changed in firmware, I don't know, whether there's a hardware reason for it. But, if it was going to be stuck on a specific pin, I'd rather have had it on pin 10. But there we go. But that's how you can set up your redundancy. So again, we can chain this, we can have SBUS out and SBUS in, or like I mentioned earlier, we can have SBUS in for the redundant receiver coming in, we can have SBUS out going to an SBUS to PWM converter to get access to channels 9 to 16, for example. So there's lots of different things we can do with the setup. Now, with regards to the stabilization stuff, that should be exactly the same as on my previous video where I show you how to set up the SXRs. So I'll put a link to that in the video description. But if we look at the tools, so it's device config, we basically have our calibration here. So let me unplug that. So we'll go into calibration and just follow the instructions basically. Now, one thing I've noticed is this sticker is the opposite to these. So when it does the label thing, make sure to follow the instructions on the label. So let's just go through the process now. So we have our label faced up. We're just going to click done and it's going to calibrate. Now we need the label face down, click when done, calibrate. Vertical, I'm actually going to use this other receiver so I don't squash the antennas, and just hold it there, done. And again, we have our port, so I'm going to use the other receiver. Now these are the steps that people can get wrong. So it has placed the receiver with legible lettering and pins to the right. So what it means by legible lettering is that you can actually see it, not that it's up the right way. So the lettering or the wording is facing you and the pins are on the right are the most important thing. So the lettering is upside down, but it's facing me and the pins are on the right. So we click OK. And this time the lettering facing me, pins on the left, and then OK. So that's the calibration done. So that's the only thing to look out for on these, where it's basically the sticker is up the other way. Just have the wording facing you and it's all good. Right, so the SXR tools, I'm just going to have a brief look at this to answer a couple of questions. Again, the full setup is in the other video, but just a couple of things that people sometimes forget about. If you want to turn the stabilization off and just use this as a basic receiver, you just want to set this SXR enable to off. The stabilizer is now off, it's just a basic receiver. A lot of people plug stuff like flaps into channels 5 and 6. What you need to do in that case is make sure that the AUX1 and AUX2 are turned on. If you don't turn on AUX1, it thinks that pin 5 is a second aileron and it thinks that pin 6 is a second elevator. You need to turn both of these on so that it will just take what is in your mixer. So if you're using flaps on channels 5 and 6, it will use those. Always leave quick mode on, it's just easier. You don't get like the knife edge and hover with the quick mode. I personally have never used it with knife edge or hover, partly because I think it's cheating, and also I don't know how much of a training aid it would actually be because it's doing it for you, but also because where I've never used it, I don't really want to recommend it to people until I've done so. So I have had people ask for videos on that, and I do have a plane that I'm setting up with a stabilized receiver, which I will try the hover and knife edge mode on. And when I do that and I'm happy with everything, I will make a video for you guys. The other thing is the self-check. Before, you used to have to flick a switch a couple of times to enter self-check mode. Now all you need to do is put it on self-check. And then when that blue light starts flashing will be where you put the sticks to your extremes, of course in high rates, and then that's it. So you don't need to use the triple switch anymore, but that's how you go about doing it. So that's done the self-check now. So that's just a quick recap, if you like, of the SXR tool. So that self-check should be off now. But yeah, when I do the knife edge and hover stuff, I will revisit and do a complete video again on the SR side of things. So there you go, guys. That's basically all we need to know about this receiver. Now, what's my opinion of it? I actually think this is a very positive receiver. Actually, the fact that it binds so easily with both ACCST and ACCESS is brilliant. And I know FrSky are bringing out a range of plus receivers, and basically I think it's going to replace all their standard receivers with this plus version, which will just work with old and new transmitters alike, which, you know, no one can hate on that. That's a really positive thing. Other than that, yeah, it seems fine. If you treat this as a replacement for the SR8 Pro, then there's really nothing not to like about this receiver, with the exception of that redundancy thing, the SBUS IN being on pin 1. I was actually thinking when I was recording that segment, how does that affect the stabilisation? So I didn't really want to leave this video where it was without going over this SBUS IN. So the issue is we need to put SBUS IN on pin 1 if we are using redundancy. And I thought I'd have a play and see what happens, but also I have heard back from my contact at FrSky, and I know that this is the recommended solution. So all I've done is moved the output mappings of everything along one. And if we pop into the receiver, so we're going to go down into our set and options, and you can see all I've done is shifted them all down one. Well, the 6 that I'm using. So this is a different transmitter model from the earlier part of the video because I needed to actually use a fixed wing to test this. So this is a 5 channel. So we have ailerons on a channel each. We have elevator, rudder, and the throttle I'm just using for the Beck. But what I've done is I've moved the first 6 down 1 pin. So channel 6 is on pin 7, channel 5 is on pin 6, and so on, until we get to channel 1, which is actually coming out of pin 2. So that corresponds on here where we have an empty one on pin 1, because that is going to be our SBUS in for our redundancy receiver. Pin 2 is channel 1, pin 3 is channel 2, pin 4 is channel 3, and so on. So we've literally just moved these down. But this does work. The onboard mixer is happy with this and it all works. So I'm just going to show you. And all I've done on this is reverse the outputs that I needed to and the parts in the SXR tool to make sure that all the stabilization and control surfaces directions go the right way. So at the moment we're in the manual mode, so there's no stabilization on, but just to show the surfaces, if I roll to the right, you can see they're rolling the right, left, pitch up, pitch down, rudder left and right. So that's all working. So what I'll do is put it in self-leveling mode, and you can see now if I bank over, I'm trying to get it so you can see this one's coming up, this one is going down, but you can see that's working correctly. If I nose dive, you'll see it's trying to pitch up. So the stabilization, and also if I put the nose up, it's trying to pitch down. So the stabilisation is all working, so there's no worries with that. So you can just shift those all along and update it on the pins in the receiver settings, and it will all work fine. But yeah, as a replacement for an SR8 Pro, brilliant receiver. As a replacement for the SR10 Pro, I would rather have had the slightly bigger form factor with the XT60s and also the SBUS in and out on the back. To me, it's losing out on a few nice features there. I would love to see an SR10 Pro Plus that has all that back in it, but again, I don't know if that will ever happen. That's just my recommendation. But yeah, it works really well. I mentioned I'm going to put a receiver in a plane to test the hover and everything. I'm actually just going to use this because I've got it here in my hands and it can go straight in the plane. So maybe that video will come out sooner rather than later. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If I don't know the answer myself, I will do what I can to find the answer for you. But I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up or two. Not that you can give two. The subscribe button and the bell icon also really help. That will get this video out to more people so they can learn about this receiver too. And yeah, overall, I'm pretty positive about this. The fact that it's backwards compatible with ACCST really is a big positive for me. And there are plenty of people with like X10s and X9Ds. I mean, those things are pretty bulletproof. The only reason I don't really use this is because I bought the Horus X10S and I sort of prefer the layout on that now. It still works perfectly even after all this time, so it's fantastic that a brand new receiver will just work straight away with that transmitter. So thank you for watching, guys. Fly models like you stole them. I'll see you on the next one.